The Tyrannosaurus Rex was nothing like what Hollywood described. You think it's blind to still targets? You think freezing saves you? Congratulations, you just became dinner. A T-Rex possessed 55 degrees of binocular, 3D vision. It already knows exactly where you are, how far away, and where you're headed. So don't ask if you could survive. Ask if you'd even see it coming. Forget the movies. Modern science just made that second question a whole lot scarier. For over 100 years, you've been sold a lie. A profitable one. The slow, roaring, half-blind lizard dragging its tail through the dirt. That thing never existed. So how did the greatest predator in Earth's history get turned into a clumsy joke for a full century? Go back to Hell Creek, Montana, where Barnum Brown was working in the early 1900s under brutal conditions. His bosses at the American Museum of Natural History in New York want a museum monster, and they want it fast. Working from a shattered, incomplete skeleton, Brown's team does what any team under pressure does. They guess. They're missing the arms, so they bolt on three-fingered hands borrowed from an entirely different dinosaur. Embarrassing, sure. But the real disaster is the posture. Nobody understands the physics of a massive animal balanced on two legs. So they stand it straight up, like a prehistoric kangaroo. Picture bolting a sprinter's legs onto a heavyweight's torso and calling it athletic. That's roughly what they did to the most feared hunter in history. That upright pose drags the tail through the dirt. It turns a razor-efficient killer into a lumbering cartoon. It takes paleontologists most of the 20th century to finally tip that skeleton forward into the horizontal weapon it actually was. But the posture, it turns out, was the easy fix. The real reckoning was happening somewhere deeper, inside the bone itself, at the cellular level. Paleontologist Gregory Erickson helped pioneer that approach. People started calling it the microscopic revolution. Slice a fossil thin enough and it tells you things the skeleton never could. Start with the mouth, because that's where the story gets its first real twist. You're probably picturing a jaw full of daggers hanging permanently out of the gums, crocodile style. It looks incredible on a movie poster. It's also, biologically, a weak point. Scientists counted the daily growth rings buried inside the enamel. A single one of those banana-sized teeth took over a year to grow. A tooth that valuable doesn't get left out in the open air like a crocodile's. Years of dry exposure would leave that enamel brittle, and brittle enamel doesn't survive a bone-crushing bite. So how did evolution protect an investment that expensive? The leading answer comes from a 2023 study comparing tooth-to-skull proportions across dozens of species. Tyrannosaurus, it turns out, had lips, thin, scaly, moisture-sealing lips, closer to a Komodo dragon's than a crocodile's. Not everyone's fully sold, but the evidence lines up well enough that most now treat it as the working model. Those lips kept the teeth bathed in saliva around the clock. The deadliest bite in history, it turns out, was also, quietly, high maintenance. The next upgrade touches the entire body, and it starts by killing a myth you've probably heard. Somewhere along the way, clickbait convinced half the internet that T-Rex was basically a giant fluffy chicken. Chemical analysis of bone isotopes does point toward an animal running hot. A genuine internal furnace, not the sluggish, cold-blooded lizard of old textbooks. That much is reasonably solid. What's still murky is the feathers. Smaller, earlier tyrannosaur relatives definitely wore fuzzy proto-feathers. For years, scientists assumed T-Rex inherited that coat too. But nobody has ever actually found feather impressions from a Tyrannosaurus itself, only scaly skin. If it kept insulation as a hatchling, The leading idea is a furnace-hot adult would have shed it eventually. So which is it? Fuzzy killer or bare-skinned killer? Honestly, the fossil record won't fully commit either way. That gap is exactly why paleontologists keep digging. The next skin impression they find could settle it either way. Here's what nobody argued about though: mass. CT scans of living birds and reptiles let engineers correct decades of shrink-wrapped dinosaur art. The numbers weren't close. Real theropods carried far more muscle than those lean sketches ever suggested. Thicker bones, denser spines, bigger tendon attachments. This wasn't some lean, shrink-wrapped lizard. It was built like it trained for a living, day in and day out. For years, a specimen nicknamed Scotty, discovered in Saskatchewan, somewhere under 9 tons, stood as the biological ceiling nobody thought could be beaten. Then, in 2024, a statistical study ran the math differently. It modeled the whole population, not just the fossils we happen to find. And the ceiling moved. Hard. Consider the scale of what we're actually missing. Researchers estimate something like 2.5 billion Tyrannosaurus ever lived and died across those final few million years of the Cretaceous. We've recovered maybe 84 skeletons complete enough to study. Run those odds. Finding the single biggest individual that ever lived would be a coin flip landing on its edge. Technically possible, practically absurd. Factor in normal variation across a population that size, and the upper estimate lands around 15,000 kilograms. 70% heavier than Scotty. Picture a predator the size of a loaded city bus running full throttle the entire time. That's not a confirmed animal anyone has dug up. It's a mathematical ceiling. But somewhere in the Cretaceous, the odds say something close to it was walking around. You know the movie shot, the water glass shivering on the dashboard before the ground-shaking thud arrives. Great for a trailer. Biologically, it's nonsense. A predator this size couldn't afford to announce itself. Loud predators starve. So how does something the weight of a school bus move through a forest without anyone hearing it coming? Fossilized trackways gave paleontologists the answer, and it's stranger than the movies ever guessed. T-Rex walked on its toes. Digitigrade, the same basic stance an ostrich uses. Thick elastic ligaments and cushioned pads of fat and cartilage absorbed the shock of every step before it ever hit the ground as noise. A genuinely padded, near-silent stride, carrying enormous weight. How fast it could actually move once it locked onto something is still debated. Older estimates put a full sprint near 40 kilometers an hour, highway speed, but one of the most detailed biomechanical models ever built for this animal says otherwise. A 2017 study combined 2 separate stress analysis techniques. It argued the skeleton couldn't survive a true running gait at that mass. The bone stress would simply be too catastrophic. That would mean an adult never topped a brisk, heavy-footed walk. Either way, here's the part that should bother you more. It didn't need to be fast, it only needed to be quiet. So there's your first answer. You wouldn't have heard it coming. And quiet only helps against something hunting by sight. What happens when the thing tracking you is reading the air itself? Comparative studies of tyrannosaur brain cases matched against living predators turned up something that reframes the entire hunt. A disproportionate share of that massive brain was wired almost entirely for smell. Researchers modeling the olfactory system estimate somewhere around 600 scent receptor genes, a hair below a modern house cat and well above almost anything else stalking the Cretaceous. That's an animal that could pass blood, sweat and fear drifting downwind, then walk toward it without a sound. So there's your second answer. You wouldn't have smelled it coming either. It would already have smelled you. As it turns out, the biggest mistake in this whole story wasn't the T-Rex's, it was ours. For decades, paleontologists kept finding smaller, leaner tyrannosaur skeletons buried alongside full-grown adults. The field quietly filed them away as juveniles. Teenage. T-Rex's, going through an awkward, fast-legged growth spurt. Tidy story. Then researchers cut into those teenage skulls and started mapping features that lock permanently into place once an animal stops growing. Sinus patterns in the snout, microscopic growth rings sealed inside the bone. None of it matched a true, still-maturing Tyrannosaurus. In late 2025, paleontologists Lindsay Zano and James Napoli laid out the case. A second independent team reached the same conclusion weeks later, using a completely different bone. Those weren't awkward teenagers at all. They belonged to a separate predator entirely. Nanotyrannus, a lean, fully grown rival, hunting the same ground it had spent decades getting mistaken for. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If those fast, lean skeletons weren't young Tyrannosaurus, how long did a real one actually take to grow up? Slice through fossilized bone and count the growth rings, and the honest answer is agonizingly long. A Tyrannosaurus needed something like 35 to 40 years to reach full size. A warm-blooded body burning that many calories doesn't get there cheap. That's the better part of 3 decades spent running a caloric deficit it could never fully close. In the animal kingdom, hunger tends to breed aggression. A juvenile stuck in that hole had every reason to hunt anything it could catch. Lighter, faster, and hungrier than the adults, these younger animals likely chased prey the 15-ton giants never could. Full-grown adults, meanwhile, ambushed the largest herbivores in near silence, which means there was no safe age. No, it's just a juvenile window where the danger eased off. Every size, every stage of life was already hunting something. So here's where that leaves us. Would you have seen it coming? Not by sound, not by scent, and not by waiting out some safer stage of its life, because there wasn't one. The roaring, tail-dragging monster from your childhood is officially retired. What's replaced it doesn't announce itself at all. It's better armored than the movies ever bothered to draw it, tooth to tail. Its bite came pre-hydrated. It likely moved in near total silence, whether or not it ever truly ran. It tracked prey through scent alone, and it carried decades of accumulated hunger into every single hunt. So say the next big-budget dinosaur movie ditched the nostalgia. Say it put this version on screen instead, quieter, smarter, more patient. Would you actually want to watch? Let me know down in the comments. If you're into the wildest, best-supported corners of science without the dry academic filler, you know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Stay curious, stay quiet, and I'll see you in the next one.